Are you an aspiring candidate in the upcoming general elections? Do you want your agenda and manifesto to reach your voters effectively? At KBC, we have the most comprehensive and credible online platform that has profiles of all prospective candidates. Log on to www.kbc.co.ke/2022 aspirants and let Kenyans know more about you, your past achievements, your manifesto, and your development agenda once you get elected to office. What's more, the website is easy to navigate. We will create your profile, post pictures and short videos with your campaign messages at affordable hosting fees. Log on to www.kbc.co.ke/2022 aspirants today and establish your brand authority as we lead towards the forthcoming general elections.
Promise me to take good care of my sister.
You can count on me.
I can't bring myself to accept that my only son and my daughter are going to get married. I can't do it.
I'll do my best to get the company back on its feet. Please calm down. Give me a bit more time.
Your best choice is to transfer the ownership of Shufeng to me.
What?
There's no way! I won't accept it! I won't accept it!
Let's put the past behind us. Just come back to me.
Umefuata nini?
Bana, ameniambia ukweli leo.
Can keep a secret.
Naona to introduce kitengo cha fashion and events katika kampuni yetu.
Kuna tatizo lolote la pili ambalo wewe walijua?
Lakini wewe kuja hapa bila kuniambia sio kaida yako.
Interview waenda na ukirudi mikono mitupu. Ni mara ngapi?
Ushakalata never ready for the cash. Ushakalata them chatting one. None of them can stop my love. No, they can stop my love with it. One love is an action. One love is action. Gonna burn all night, everything right. I know you're feeling the fires. Yeah, break and party. It's going on. It's gonna burn all night.
I'm on kickback with a spliffing on me dark corner. And I think about my future. How the system wicked on ya.
Hit him again. Don't expect me to stand by and do nothing. I'll report you to the authorities and I'll take him away.
No.
I think Julieta will kill herself.
What? If we get thrown out of this house, you're going to pay.
Are you selling your son to me?
Yes.
I never thought that you'd stoop so low as to sell your son.
Don't you realize that he's only telling you what you want to hear? And while he chooses to live like a king, you have to struggle and keep your head down.
Daughters who are perfect don't tell lies nor hide bad things that happen to them.
Tell me the truth, Paulina.
Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah.
Pia tunazungumzia fadhila za mwezi mtukufu wa Ramadhani. Wanaombea msamaha watu wenye kutoa sadaka, wanaombea msamaha watu wenye kufuturisha, wanaombea msamaha kila mtu aliyekubali kufuata maamrisho ya Mwenyezi Mungu.
يراني نقولها قدام السامعين واللي متابعين الفرد وسنة يراني لنحاشم.
Promise me to take good care of my sister.
You can count on me.
I can't bring myself to accept that my only son and my daughter are going to get married. I can't do it.
I'll do my best to get the company back on its feet. Please calm down. Give me a bit more time.
Your best choice is to transfer the ownership of Shufeng to me.
What?
There's no way! I won't accept it! I won't accept it!
Let's put the past behind us. Just come back.
Are you an aspiring candidate in the upcoming general elections? Do you want your agenda and manifesto to reach your voters effectively? At KBC, we have the most comprehensive and credible online platform that has profiles of all prospective candidates. Log on to www.kbc.co.ke/2022 aspirants and let Kenyans know more about you, your past achievements, your manifesto, and your development agenda once you get elected to office. What's more, the website is easy to navigate. We will create your profile, post pictures and short videos with your campaign messages at affordable hosting fees. Log on to www.kbc.co.ke/2022 aspirants today and establish your brand authority as we lead towards the forthcoming general elections.
Hit him again. Don't expect me to stand by and do nothing. I'll report you to the authorities and I'll take him away.
No.
I think Julieta will kill herself.
What? If we get thrown out of this house, you're going to pay.
Are you selling your son to me?
Yes.
I never thought that you'd stoop so low as to sell your son.
Don't you realize that he's only telling you what you want to hear? And while he chooses to live like a king, you have to struggle and keep your head down.
Daughters who are perfect don't tell lies nor hide bad things that happen to them.
Tell me the truth, Paulina.
Do you have a new story to share with KBC? Get in touch swiftly on email news@kbc.co.ke or call 0723-892-654 or 0734-780-124.
A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for creating time for us tonight as we kickstart Kenya Decides, the second episode of a program that will see us head to the 2022 general election in a manner that will help us as Kenyans have useful conversations that will help us make useful decisions when that time comes. But today we are going to do something a little bit different as the country is in a season of mourning the country's third president, Emilio Stanley Mwai Kibaki, who was a son of peasant farmers and spent part of his time, earning a living as a part-time bus conductor. Who knew that someday he would rise through the ranks to become the country's most powerful man and also be part of global history? He has served this country as a member of parliament, as a cabinet minister, as a vice president, as the leader of official opposition, and as a president. So how was that possible? And what legacy does he leave behind? That is our focus tonight on Kenya Decides as we look at Kibaki's legacy and of course how he propelled this country to where we are today. Allow me tell you who I'll be having on the panel and helping me, unpack this conversation. I'll start from the gentleman on my far left. His name is Herman Manyora. Herman is a political analyst, also a lecturer at the University of Nairobi. He's the owner and founder of Nairobi Review, which runs the Herman Manyora YouTube channel and also the Nairobi Review media website. Thank you, Herman, for creating time for us.
Thank you very much.
All right, and the lady on the panel, a seasoned journalist. Her name is Rose Lucalo. She's an editor, but has gained experience in senior editorial roles in both print, broadcast, and online media. She's here to tell us the key highlights of how it was to practice journalism back in the day and lessons that she has also, documenting the critical points of Kibaki's journey as a leader, as a politician. Thank you, Rose, for creating time. All right, and we also have with us Dr. Kennedy Hongo. Should I add HSC? Dr. Hongo is a political analyst and a governance expert. He's an alumni of Starehe Boys Center and of course a missionary, and I can go on and on about your rich profile, but also quite an experience you had with the country's third president during your time at Starehe. Thank you for creating time for us tonight as well.
Thank you, madam.
All right. So we want just to look at, this man Kibaki, and we'll be looking at his, style of leadership, his legacy, and what stood out about him. But before we get into that, as an opener, I'd like to ask all of you, when you think about Kibaki, in one word, how do you describe this gentleman, Herman?
Well, a good Kenyan, a good president. Yeah.
Rose?
Super focused, very intelligent.
Kennedy?
A very articulate man. A very articulate man and a visionary leader. That would be my description of our third president.
All right, and all of you will be justifying that statement for us based on your experiences and your interactions with him. But I'd like to begin from Kibaki before entry into politics. He was a lecturer just as yourself, Herman. Many may not have really focused on that part of Kibaki, but I just want us to open up this conversation by looking at who Kibaki might have been had he not ventured into politics. Might have been a critical decision he had to make, transitioning from the lecture hall to, politics. As somebody who is in that position, just tell us a bit about, what you think he would have been.
First, condolences, of course, to the family and the people of Kenya. A British minister passed on, and during his, I think the funeral service, somebody eulogized him and said, this guy was an academic. He was quite qualified with all the papers people get to be professors. But he said, if he had not left the academia, he would just be a footnote. But he left, and here we are talking about a great man. I think the same applies to Kibaki. Maybe if he had remained at Makerere, he could have added a few papers on his CV and qualified to become things people become at the university. But maybe nobody would have known him. And maybe the services he has rendered to Kenyans and mankind perhaps would not have been rendered. But again, that's how life is. So he left when he was just barely starting his teaching career at Makerere. He still had a long way to go. So you wouldn't know how it would have gone. Perhaps that's how God had wanted it, that start a bit of this, then go and serve your people. And that's what happened, yeah.
His decision to enter politics, for you, how do you describe it? Looking at what he achieved after, he became a politician, and even after he served as a cabinet minister, how do you describe that critical decision he made to get into this?
Many of the things we do in life are not always of our own making, in terms of we make the decisions on our own. Sometimes there are accidents, sometimes it's fate. Here was Jaramogi Oginga Odinga hearing of a bright young Kenyan in Makerere and going all out to get him from there. So much as he might have made the decision himself, but there was also influence from Jaramogi Oginga Odinga who went to get him. And I think looking back throughout his career, and specifically when he was president, then looking back, he must have said, yes, I made the right decision to leave teaching and come and serve my country. Yeah, because he did it with a good degree of success.
Rose, you spent a better time of your early, life as a journalist, documenting the steps he took, even as he entered into politics and the things that he did. What did you say stood out for you about that experience?
Well, if I speak from this perspective of a journalist, I think I can really remember how excited we would be if his name was on the docket. You knew you would get a good story. You knew it would be worth covering. You knew there would be follow-up. He was a very, very, he was like an ideal person to report on. If you broke a story today, I remember writing a story just about a health clinic in Westlands, in Nairobi. And the next morning he was there. He had assembled the whole team that needed to be, involved, and they were tearing apart what had happened. This clinic was in disrepair, It's the kind of person he was, and that's only one story. So I think we think of him very often as the ideal politician, because for a journalist, you report a story because you want to see the change. And it is very, very, very disheartening when you report a story and nothing happens. And you report a story and nothing happens. So he was just a pleasure to cover. Beyond that, he was very, very articulate. He understood his subject matter and very, very clear about what needed to be done and what was going to be done. And he followed up. I remember him as one of the only people who would give you like a position statement after he's finished doing the follow-up. This is the situation, or we don't have the money, or we're putting it in budget, whatever, you know. It wouldn't just die. So in that regard, he was a pleasure to cover. But I want to reflect on what Manyora was saying, because I think speaking to people who knew him even earlier, I have heard that he was, to his bones, a politician. Because I hear that even in his earliest days, he's the one who set up the KANU office as a volunteer. No money, no payment, but the passion to see this thing established and take off. So I think it was in his bones.
It was coming.
It was coming.
On his way.
It was coming.
So the political side was just a matter of time before it actually came to the
Absolutely.
fore. Yeah, we'll get into more about your experience as a journalist, you know. But I just also like to hear from you, Dr. Kennedy, something that also many have not really quite focused on. As a protege of Dr. Griffin's, may his soul rest in peace, it gave you quite an experience to interact with the country's third president, and you know, just talk to us about that interaction and what stood out for you.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity and the honor of being here today with my dear brother and sister here. One of the things that I would like to really say, as you already mentioned it, is that honor Griffin gave to me. And I must admit that as an old student of Starehe Boys Center School, my first interaction with the third president of the Republic of Kenya was in 1983. And I also have to say that deeply in my heart, I look at the Kibaki we knew as boys and how articulate he was, how inspiring, and the degree of intelligence. And as I said earlier on, the vision that he had for this country, whenever he would come to talk to us as boys, listening to him speak was really inspiring. And then, of course, many may not know, but he was the ceremonial head of Starehe Boys Center School. He was our patron from 1970 to the date of his death. He never retired, he never resigned, he continued to be the patron of Starehe Boys Center School. So as it were, the success story behind Griffin cannot be said without President Kibaki, because he basically stood there to lift Griffin's hands many, many times, and even in difficult moments. So then, as a student, we saw a man that was the epitome of success and a true leader that you would emulate. There's a principle that I call the onion principle, where you look at an onion and you see the outer cover, you peel that and you see the inner and next cover, and as you peel it, more and more. When you talk about President Kibaki, you rightly said so. Here was the son of a peasant, a bus conductor, a poor boy, struggling through life, doing all manner of things, rising through the ranks. So the first onion, or the first cover you're looking at, is almost a non-entity. And then the next moment, a very intelligent young man, very clever. Academically, he was one of the most brilliant young men that Kenya has ever produced. So to us Starehians, that was a real example of a man starting from the base and rising step by step through the ladder to the highest level possible. So he was a role model, an example, worthy emulating. And then, of course, as I went through my studies in that grade school, finally becoming Griffin's personal assistant and assistant director at Starehe Boys Center School and head of public affairs and resource mobilization, I had the honor of mediating or sometime being the go-between Griffin and President Kibaki. Griffin never liked to travel a lot. His life was basically about Stare and the National Youth Service. So whenever he needed to send somebody to his patron, at some point I was in between, reaching out with the information from Griffin to President Kibaki, and then even when he ceased to be the vice president in the Republic of Kenya, that was a very difficult time. But I remember sharing a lot of times with him at the Muthaiga Golf Club, sometimes up to 3 a.m. in the morning, just chatting. And President Kibaki, that time he was not the president, he was the MP of Othaya. And he would be talking about what bedevils Kenya. And recently President Uhuru was making a statement. Some of us just like to complain and talk, but then offer a solution. One great thing about President Kibaki was that he knew the problems and he also knew the answers. So if you listened to him keenly, he would not only tell you what the problems were, but would also tell you how to solve those problems. That is one thing that stands out for me.
All right. And you know, he goes down history as somebody who was part of the longest serving parliamentarians in this particular country. We just talked about Othaya. Before Othaya, there was Donholm. 1963, 1969, he was re-elected. He went to Othaya from 1974 to 2007. There must have been something about him that made him make it to that list of the longest serving parliamentarians, Herman.
Yeah, like Ross said, you know, there are people who go to politics without something burning in them, you know, nothing in their belly. Nothing driving you. I think he was cut out to serve society, and really, because look at it this way: how many people would have been as smart as Mwai Kibaki and not go for the good things of life in terms of good jobs, international jobs? You know, as early as 1974, he was listed among the 100 people in the world who were almost certainly going to lead their countries as presidents or prime ministers. That's 1974. Still a young man. He's a brilliant man with very little much. He would really have gone. There were many other things people were going for, but he stuck with the public service. He stuck with serving people. Remember, even then, as a member of parliament, you never really quite earned money. It was like a free job, like I wish it is today. They got some little allowances because up to the time he was at Donholm, salaries were like 8,000 shillings per month. And look at that brilliant brain, you know, just hanging in there into politics. So suddenly, because there are many who left to go and do better things. You know, not to listen to villagers and talk about water those days, women ferrying water on the backs of heads, traveling kilometers of, you know, that's the stuff you are listening to at that time. People are now enjoying being members of parliament with all the parks, with all the money, with very little problems really. To be an MP in the 60s and 70s, you came face to face with the harsh reality of life in Africa. And many people just give up. Those who stuck in had no option. You can't say that about Kibaki. So I think, like she says, certainly there was something in his belly and his bone marrow. And it's about service to people. That resilience, that staying in and serving people when there were many options. I mean, if Kibaki wanted to work with the World Bank, I mean, the UN,
it was brilliant, you know, like
people rushed for him. This is a brilliant mind. Kibaki, until he retired, you could see a brain whenever he talked. It's a brilliant mind. So, like you say, yes, there was politics in him, but me, I see service. It was service for him. Yeah.
Before I get to you, Rose, we are headed into a season of elections. You know, Kenyans are going to decide, you know, who is going to form part of the leadership of the country. Some are looking to retain their seats. What does it take for a leader to convince the populace that they deserve a second chance, like Kibaki did not once, not twice, not thrice? You know, what does it take for you to convince the populace that you deserve
it's not very easy to get people like Kibaki. And we are not saying this because he's dead. We are saying because it is true. You know, somebody who embodies hope who is inspirational. And people look at him, they see hope. Even when they're about to give up. Even when there's so much mystery surrounding them and just enough to make anybody give up, there's a person who gives people that hope. So for the people of the Odaya, for example, there was hope they could see in Kibaki. And therefore, even when the system wanted to, this system was not started yesterday. When the system wanted to rig him and they put some doctor, somebody go and remove him, I remember him remarking, gentlemen, even rigging requires some intelligence, you know. You know, because you couldn't just remove him. I mean, there's no way you could go to there and remove Kibaki. Because what I'm saying is, people could see the things we are talking about Kibaki. So we are not making them up. People could see this is a man who you can trust.
Yeah.
And above that, I think people, Kenyans, and particularly people from his place, could see this is a guy who can lead this country. And therefore, why would they deny him the chance to be on the national stage so that he, at some point he can lead this country by pulling the rug from under his feet and all that? They wouldn't do that. And those who want to be leaders, I say there are very few people really who go into leadership because they want to lead. You see, the problem we have made our politics, especially going to parliament, a question of earning money. And I tell people, until we move money from parliament, we will never have leaders. People go there because they will make money, there's CDF, there are good salaries, there are all manner of allowances. You are even paid to sit in parliament and you are an MP. So if you remove that, then you can see people like Kibaki who would want to serve. Because, and there are not many, by the way. If we say today, we want to do like I think Sweden or Norway, some of these countries, and what Kenya was before, you might know that councillors, today they are MCS, they were never full-time. It was just a part-time job, like it happens in many cities in the world. So you have her volunteering to serve because she has something she thinks she can offer to the city, or to the county council, or to parliament, for example, or the people of Kenya. If we did that, a lot of these rascals you see will not run for office. So maybe we will get a few Kibakis here and there running for office.
Just to add on that, Kennedy.
Allow me to add on what our brother Haman is saying. But key for me is, and I would say that the biggest problem that we face is our philosophy of life. If we don't get it right, then it doesn't matter what level of education you have, what status you have, how much money you have, etc., etc. I think one of the things that President Kibaki got right was the understanding that life is not about self. You don't live for yourself. You live for others. That's number one. If you get that philosophy right, that life is not about me, life is about others. For example, if today I choose to train to become a doctor of medicine, do I study that medicine so that I treat myself? So that when I'm sick I can treat myself? Or I study medicine for others? If I choose to become a teacher, do I teach myself? Or I learn teaching so that I teach others? If I become a lawyer, is it that will help me to defend myself in court, or it is for others? And that ties well with what Haman is saying, that we must come to the understanding that we are because of others, and others are because of us. So that driving principle in life is that whatever I'm doing is for others. And that brings us to another principle of public good, public gain. Now that whatever I am is meant to be of use
to others,
or to be of values to others. As I said, a doctor treats others, a teacher teaches others, an engineer is an engineer for others. So whatever it is that we are, if you do understand that it's not about the making of money that makes you become a doctor, but principle, the cardinal principle is what I'm going to be must be for the good of mankind. People like President Kibaki understood that. And that is why, again, if you allow me, I would always want us to redefine politics. To be very honest with you, I said it some time ago, that we must get to the understanding that politics is not people standing up and talking and out outdoing one another, the oratorical skills that are demonstrated to us, or buying of people. I think what is going on now are basically people looking for jobs. They're looking for jobs. Some want to be member of parliament. So they present to us their CVs. They're telling us that, look, this is who I am, give me this job. So it's like in one constituency, there's only one job for a member of parliament. So the people talking and running around, they're not politicking. They are actually begging the people to give them those jobs. So that's number one. Now, but if they understood politics for what it is, politics is about, like the second president would say, siasa mbaya, maisha baya, maisha mzuri, siasa mzuri. It's about life. It's about management. It's about policies. It's about economy. It's about structures, about systems, about the people's futures, about our roads, about water. It's about electricity. It's basically about anything that makes us good. So that is...
And voters need that awakening so that they can know that they carry that power. And they actually have that, they will be held responsible on who they decide to give that job at the end of the day.
I just wanted to chip in because just building on what you're saying, I think for me, just as a journalist wants to see that response, a voter wants to see the impact in their own life, you know? I mean, it's about going to a government office and getting service. It's about turning on your tap or having a tap near you that has water, you know, clean water. It's about having stuff that makes your life work and seeing it progress day to day. I think that is what, if we go back to your question, that is what would make me vote for somebody again and again, you know? So, I mean, I'd like to, I mean, I never lived in his constituency, so I don't know what transformation there was on the ground, but I imagine that if he could be elected that consistently over such a long period, there must have been some answering of the people's need on the ground, you know? And very often we don't see that. You elect people all over where I live, everybody is saying, we're even asking some of the MCAs, they've come back to ask for votes, they say, who are you? Where have you been? You know, we haven't seen you for 5 years, you know? And we haven't seen any change. We don't need to see the person, but we do need to see our lives evolving and progressing forward.
All right. I'm just about to, just before you come in, we look at his presidency and how, you know, different it was. But just out of curiosity, Rose, having covered him over time, you know, as a news source, how did he come out? What did he stand for? Because we are all saying here that it was about his interest for serving his people. In the newsroom, there is that messaging. You can associate somebody with something. Is it economy? Is it corruption? Is it, you know, what was he about?
You know, whichever ministry he was in, he got to understand the business of that ministry, and he was always on point. So, I mean, people describe him as an economist, and I'm sure he was a superlative economist, but I know I also covered him as a Minister for Health, and he knew everything that was going on, you know, just as he did when he became the finance minister, and just as he, you know, even in the short stint as vice president, he knew the business. And I remember my history is tied to him in an incident in December 91.
Yes.
And I remember it was Christmas Day, and I got to the office and people are telling me Kibaki has called. And let me tell you, there's nothing that will stop a newsroom like that, you know, because you know it is something. And that was the day that he resigned, you know. So, I mean, we took him as seriously as he took us, you know. So I think I don't really attach economy to, I don't think that he was absolutely interested in one particular thing. I think if you had made him Minister for Sports, he'd have transformed sports. If you had made him Minister for Gender, he would have transformed gender, you know. So that's the kind of person he was. He was a person of excellence and action, 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 which is what I feel like we see, you know, we don't always see today.
Maybe if you allow me to
and
also
we'll
answer
come
that.
to that Christmas experience, by the way. Yeah.
I can answer also that question in this way. I told you there were times we'd spend time with him at the Muthaiga Golf Club up to 2 a.m., 2:30 a.m., 3 a.m., and of course, hearing him talk. President Kibaki stood for a more perfect Kenya, a better country. And that is why, if you put him in any ministry, he would do his best, because that was still part of the whole. If you did well, it's just like his friend Griffin, who taught us that if you're given a coffee cup to wash, wash it better than it has ever been washed before. That whatever job you're given, if it's about cleaning the wall, the floor, or the toilets, or working in the streets, give your best. That drove President Kibaki. His agenda was, if this will make things better, if this will improve and give my people quality of life, I would do it. And that is why you'll be talking about economy. If you faced the economic aspect of our lives, he did the best. If it was health issues, he gave it the best. If it was about finances, planning, he still dreamed of how can it be at the epitome of it all.
Right. Okay, Kennedy. Let's talk about this common phrase we've had so much lately, Herman, a gentleman of Kenyan politics. Let's put this in context and give this phrase some meaning. You know, what does this mean for you, looking at Kibaki and the life he lived?
You know, really it's about comparing him with his peers and people of his time. Politics was always confrontational. Campaigns were always rough, machetes and things like those. And people are vulgar, and people are in situations where there were cross-cultural interactions. People are banally tribalistic and saying very bad things about other people. You didn't get that from Kibaki. No, he was a gentleman of politics. I mean, he could do his thing without insulting anybody. He could be firm without having to be shouty, you know. So people say, look at this. For that reason, people also thought he was too cowardly, yeah? Because you know, Kenyan politics really gives much premium to drama, yeah? People of drama, and Kibaki wasn't a man of drama.
Yeah.
So he got all manner of monikers, you know, like Igoya, which is coward and so on. A man who never saw a fence he didn't want to sit on. But basically, he was a man. He was like Mudavadi before he joined Ruto. You see, the Mudavadi with Ruto now, is a different Mudavadi.
I didn't even see you go there.
That kind of, in fact, you know, Mudavadi was like, now, if you wanted Kibaki, you would find him in Mudavadi, something like that. Eh? People who can put across their point without being nasty, you know, which is not very common, especially in those days.
And also don't take offense very easily.
Yeah, very easily. I remember one time when he was running for president, I think that was 2002, and a guy told him, at 70, what are you looking for? How? A journalist asked him, you know what he said? He said, this is the beauty of democracy. Yeah. People are allowed to say what they want. And you know, somebody else would have been nasty to the journalist. Yeah. No, I mean, you're an old man. Why are you running for office? Now, this is the beauty of democracy. Yes. People are allowed to say what they can say. You know, so he was a contrast. That's why people are saying he was, you know, they're giving him, because he was just a contrast. And let me tell you why. It is because of his level of sophistication in terms of intellectualism. You know, he is a man who would use more of his brain than, you know, other fellows. So the fairly bright fellow. And whenever you interacted with him or even just had him chance to listen to him speak, and a journalist here can tell you, you could see brains at power. So it's not always easy for a person of that intellectual capacity and persuasion to turn nasty and, you know, go low and hit below the belt. So basically he was a man who knew he understood what he wanted, and he could convince people, he could pass across his point, he could do a job he's given, and for that reason he didn't see and then again, that was his character. You know, we are what we are sometimes. Politics does not always make people bad. No, it may be, as they say, it gives you an opportunity, it gives people the opportunity to see what you can be when you have power. So he was basically a gentleman, and not the coward people thought. And even when he became president, people could now see, now this is the Kibaki, because he would be very firm. He would do things people would not expect Kibaki to do. like he could let his friend Mwai, Madenge, very close buddies, Madenge buddies, lose nominations and seats when he's watching. People would expect he would give them favors, but he would be firm. No, you follow the right channel. If you want money, you go to a bank and get a loan. So then people began to see, that guy wasn't a coward. That guy wasn't weak.
He can actually stand his ground when it is necessary. Dr. Kennedy, you were sharing that earlier with me about him not being somebody who was quick to issue freebies and just give you something just because you had to earn it for Kibaki to allow you have it.
That's very true. And just building on that and what brother here is saying, one of the qualities you'd be sure of about Kibaki was that he was self-assured. He was sure of himself. He knew who he was. He didn't expect to get it from anybody, but he believed in himself, he believed in his mission, he believed in what he knew was right. And the result of that, again, he was not acidic in his words. He knew how to use the right words for the right reason and for the right cause. And that is one of the things that personally I think sometimes we miss. That how you say and put across what you have in you is key to your achievement and how you present that to the people. So looking back to our man, I'd want to say that many of us would buy the dogs, but they do the barking. You give people jobs, and you still want to do it for them. But Kibaki believed that if he gave you the job, he expected you to do it, and do it well. He had also a very interesting way of following whatever he gave you to do. Many of us are bored and being nosy. You give somebody the job and you're almost nosy like you know. But he was like, he's allowed you to do it, he's not there, and yet he's there. He's there, but all pervasive, but non-intrusive. The other thing that I believe, as we were sharing on, about working for it, that there's nothing for free. It has to be worked. Anything that is produced is not an accidental occurrence. Somebody somewhere to do it. So his question was, why wouldn't you do what you should do? So that is the reason why he did not so much believe in freebies. He taught us the value of work. And if we do understand that work is not punishment. Work is basically serving. Work is doing what needs to be done and what gets things from wherever they are to be what they should become. So that was one of the things I loved about him too.
Yeah, Rose, some people interpreted this gentlemanly sort of approach to mean that he was sort of out of it, that he was not hands-on, he was not at the heart, at the center of the action. Just describe to us, how this played out. I think he wore many hats also in politics. I think when he served under President Mwai, he served. He recognized where his authority, the authority to whom he had pledged, himself. And when he changed his mind, he also went all out. Because I remember him taking part in protests. I remember in the Central Park, it's all been dug up now, but I remember a protest march, huge gathering from PCEA to protest for constitutional reform, minimum reforms. And I remember actually they walked over the fence because the police cordon had cut off the roads. They walked over the fence, Reverend Joya, Kijana Wamalwa, and Kibaki was right there. I had never seen him in that kind of, role. And he was tear gassed. He was tear gassed under the tree next to Serena Hotel. The gentleman
of
politics.
So when he gave his heart, his soul, his purpose to something, he was right there in it, you know. He was right there with the people that he stood with.
All right. So let's talk about something interesting that also gave you quite an experience on Christmas. And this was, he first served as the vice president. And then there was a fallout between him and the then president, may his soul rest in peace, Daniel Toroitich arap Moi. He was moved to the health docket, but scrapped, of that VP, title. So he was no longer vice president, and he stayed loyal for about what he did. He resigned, and then Rose, you were there. At that time you go, and this is big news for any newsroom, and you break the news to the nation. This didn't go well with you, did it?
My job lasted 3 hours.
I do not want to be in your shoes, but what happened?
No, it was, I think it was very much part of that time. A lot of journalists will tell you, many were tortured, detained, being fired, I think I got off lightly. So actually what happened is that he called in the morning wanting to give this information. And at that time, the practice was that people got fired. If you were suspected of non-allegiance, you would get fired on the 1 o'clock news, So the regime, the Moi regime, would let you go and, have the hand up, have one hand up on you. So in a way, he upstaged Moi, and I'm the one who delivered.
Who resigns on Moi? Who actually dares to resign?
So this happened in the morning, and by 1:15, I was just told by the chairman, go home. We'll let you know what's going to happen, and eventually they let me go. But I think it was, I was on the side of truth. I really analyzed it. It was quite a shock, to get fired for essentially bringing in a scoop.
So they should be thanking you.
I thought people should be thanking me, but clearly not. So it was also interesting because a few days later, I don't know how he got my number, but I got a call asking to meet Kibaki, the president. Not then, he was not president then. And I went to his office, and all he wanted to know what happened. He couldn't believe that I had gotten fired and etc. Wanted to know that I'm okay. And that showed me another side of him, because he didn't have to do that. I mean, lots of people get fired and
just go and life
moves on. I got what I wanted, So, I mean, I was touched by that particular thing. I didn't get anything out of it, and I didn't want anything out of it because I think it's very important as an ethical concern in journalism that it was done.
You didn't ask for your job back? That's on a light note too. But, what did it, tell you about journalism then? And if you look at the journalism of today, there's a big clash. Just talk to us about these two experiences.
Man, it's changed so much. It has changed so much. I mean, those were days when even the person you're sitting next to in the newsroom, you're not sure whether you should trust them or not. The person you go to sit in we had people picked up from bars. You're talking to your friend, somebody overheard you, and suddenly we hear you were detained, you were picked up from the bar, So it was very, very, very tightly controlled communication environment, And we had to be so careful about what we say on news, how we say it, and make sure that it's legally, enforceable. When I compare it to today, we've won so much space, but I feel sometimes like we're abusing it and misusing it and not realizing that it's really precious. Information is really precious. There's so much misinformation, there's so much propaganda, there's so much abuse and misuse, and you just really wonder, and it becomes really confusing in a country. I mean, we're still like this show you're doing essentially is to inform people and to equip them to make the decisions that we need to make for the country, for our lives, etc. But how do you do that when you're just bombarded by nonsense. A lot of it is nonsense. I mean, I think 80% of what goes out is unfounded, unchecked, lies, it's twisted, it's discrediting people, destroying people's lives, then you get on into pornography and spying and espionage and deepfakes. My goodness, I pity the young people today, because really I wouldn't know who to trust as a source of information. And yet we fought so hard for this freedom. We fought for the freedom of information so that we could get what we need to make decisions about our life.
Yes,
And
really means a lot coming from a veteran journalist, yeah?
If she's spoken as a journalist, but many of us don't know how life was between 1982 and 1992.
Yeah.
And I think my brother Herman would be able to even tell you more about it. Between 82 and 92, and I'm saying that after the attempted coup of 1982, Kenya changed.
Yeah.
And there are things you not utter. There are some words which were anathema if you ever mentioned certain words. Today, I think we're in a different world altogether. So I can imagine what the journalists are talking about, because you didn't just talk anyhow. And then the other thing that you really also need to tell us, the time people possibly expected Kibaki to resign was in 1988, when he was dropped from being a vice president. He had served for almost 7-8 years or thereabout,
but he was
dropped.
loyal.
That is the time any sensible Kenyan thought possibly he would be resigning. So the 91 time, that caught everybody by surprise.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about 1988, and then he stays loyal to KANU and President Mwai. He doesn't make any move, and then 1991 he resigns. Then he forms a political party. Then he vies in 1992. Must have been a man on a mission, Herman.
I think 88 must be understood in two ways. One, we have always said Kibaki was about service. And we have also said on this show that you could serve from any position. There are people who can serve from any ministry. This country has had people like Michuki. You remove him from a powerful docket, take him to environment, you can see this beautiful park here. He cleaned this river. We have just messed it back. People like Nyachai, We have had people in this country. Any ministry they go to, they just shine. Kibaki was such a person. So, of course, losing the number 2 slot is quite a big thing. It's a hit. It's a big. But he took it in his stride, because again, I think it was about his vision, his purpose in life, his commitment, and knowing very well that he has something to offer this country. So if he was going through tantrums or make noise or resign, perhaps then he would never have become president. But there was also something else. Those were dangerous days. Those are not days you walked out on Mwai like that. Those were dangerous days. Even your friends will run away from you. If you resigned from Mwai's government around that time, even your friends will not talk to you. You'll go to your popular joint and people run away. Even the owner of the place will tell you, look here, you are killing my business. People have gone away. Those are not days you could just...
Like so he had to calculate his move,
Like he says, immediately after the coup, Kenya became a different place. You had to look behind and, you had very careful. So to expect Kibaki to have resigned at that time,
and I think it's also important to remember that there was a push for the push for democracy was also going on in parallel, and I think we've had waves of change, and actually by the time he was resigning, there was a really, really strong public citizens push for change. We had the protests, we had the Kamkunjis, we had protests that would paralyze the whole city completely.
The Berlin Wall had collapsed, the Cold War was over.
Yeah, hundreds and hundreds, thousands and thousands of people would converge. They would fill Uhuru Park. I mean, literally a march would fill the park. So even when he made the decision to resign, it was in a context of growing freedoms and push for change.
So he saw an opportunity.
It was
seized
timely.
the moment.
It was very timely.
Yeah, he seized the moment. So he vies in 1992, 1997, and a third time in 2002. You know, actually, it's very coincidental that the first time he did, he became third. The second time, he was edging closer. He became number 2. Then the third time, he gets sworn in as the head of state. I mean, before we get to Kibaki's presidency and how it changed the whole narrative of presidency, attempting 3 times, 2 times failing. I mean, what does this speak about his character? Any of you can jump on this.
But I think that's pretty normal, actually. It's usually, a politician usually doesn't get in on the first chance, you know. I mean, it takes a lot to build name, to build brand, knowledge, countrywide and that kind of thing. I think we see it all over the world. You usually don't just stand up and get elected. So I think it's, again, just speaks to his commitment and his purpose that he had charted from long before, and he was willing to walk that journey. And we saw it, yeah.
All right. So because of time, I'll jump to 2002. This was not the normal presidential race. It came at it came with stakes. 24-year rule is not easy to just break like that. Remember, Mwai had his own preferred successor. And he was also not very well health-wise. He got an accident at the climax of this very crucial campaign. Talk to us about the uniqueness of 202 and this new dawn that it birthed for the country, Herman.
I think 202 was unique in the sense that for the first time since the introduction of multipartyism, Kenyans saw the sense to go into this as a united opposition, an entirely united opposition. And much more important was the open defiance, hitherto unimagined. Open defiance against Mwai, with people like Kalonzo Musyoka, of all people, walking out on Mwai. You know, that was unimaginable. So that then gave the impetus to the whole movement, and it was no longer a campaign. It was a wave. It was like a movement, really, not like it was just a movement. So, and Mwai was therefore facing something that he was not familiar with. That was, I have my own theory. I've been working on a book. I also have my own reservations as to whether really Kibaki defeated Mwai. But that's for another day. But for today, let's just say that was something big. And I don't think anybody would have gone against that waiver. Mwai would not have managed. If we leave it at that. I have my own theories, which later I'll share with Kenyans.
Right. Kennedy, Kibaki as president, how do you describe him? You know, how unique was his style of leadership when he was president?
Allow me to still take you back to this before we get to that. This country has had heroes that really, if you were to sit back, we owe them some great appreciation. And I want to go back to those dark days, what we would have called dark days. They were days that only certain individuals could speak. And I want to remember one man like Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. If you wanted certain things to be said, possibly he was the only person who could speak them. So we moved out of that, and now we get to 202. And he has alluded to one point which I would want to bring to underline. For the first time, we had unity of purpose. We had serious leaders together, which has been very difficult, which was elusive for a long time. And remember again, them to be rallied. I remember back when Nyachai, Raila, there was Moody and all that. Ambitions. And actually had very clear ambition. And of course Kibaki and Charity and all that.
Many.
And people had one agenda they were focused on, to see Mwai out. Vision, as it were. And then there came Jacom Baba at the stadium declaring Kibaki Tosha. Mm-hmm.
Kibaki.
Well, we used to sell about about 10% of our total.
He was born on 15th November 1931 in Dunguri village, Odaya division in the then Nyeri district of Central Province, now Nyeri County. His parents, Kibaki Gavanji and Teresia Wanjiku, were peasant farmers. Even though he was baptized as Emilio Stanley by Italian missionaries in his youth, he has always been known as Mwai Kibaki. He began his academic journey at Gatuyaini School, which he attended for the first 2 years, completing what was then called Sub A and Sub B, equivalent of Grade 1 and Grade 2. He would later join Karima Mission School for the 3 more classes of primary, and between 1944 and 1946, he proceeded to Madari School, now Nyeri High School, for Standard 4 to 6. Aside from his academic prowess, he acquired skills in carpentry, masonry, and agriculture. He joined Mangu High School in 1947 and passed his O-level examination with a maximum of 6 points in 1950. In his final year in Mangu, Kibaki considered becoming a soldier, perhaps inspired by the veterans of the First and Second World Wars in his native village. He, however, opted to shelve his ambition and instead joined Makerere University in Kampala, Uganda, to study economics, history, and political science. His academic brilliance saw him graduate best in his class in 1955 with a first-class honors degree in economics. After his graduation, he took up an appointment as Assistant Sales Manager, Shell Company of East Africa, Uganda Division. It was while working there that he earned a scholarship to pursue a postgraduate studies in any British university. He joined the prestigious London School of Economics for a BSc in Public Finance, graduating with a distinction. In 1958, he went back to Makerere University, this time as an assistant lecturer, and taught